So there's this weird stuff on the internet that kinda rots our brains. This stuff like, for example, skibidi toilet. I've honestly got no idea what that is. The problem is that the internet is getting filled with this kind of stuff, and we spend our time engaging with this stuff. Which isn't a narrative, it's not a story, it's not a game. We just spend our time on the internet doing this weird crap. But the weirder thing is not just that we do it, it's that we can't stop. Today I'm going to teach y'all a little bit about what the hell is going on, and also hopefully give y'all a foundation to spend less time rotting your brain. We're going to talk about really fundamental stuff. We're going to be going to biological basics, and I know that may sound a little bit weird, but I think it's becoming increasingly important for you to understand how your brain actually works. Like, what is it for? Why do we have these organs called brains? Once we understand that, we'll understand what is going on with all of this weird content on the internet, which, by the way, is a weird thing to call it. It's not a story, it's not a game, it's not a movie, it's content. It's some weird, lifeless, amorphous pile of whatever that is not anywhere near an art form. So we have to understand what's going on in our brain, how this content is affecting our brain, and hopefully, that will lay the foundation for us to understand how to actually get over it. We're going to start with really basic stuff, okay? Which is, why do human beings have brains? We have brains to help us survive, and the circuitry in our brain is designed to move us towards staying alive. A lot of the stuff that we have in our brains is kind of designed for that reason. A simple example is orgasm. Why do human beings, or animals for that matter, have the capability of orgasm? Why did we evolve this kind of particular circuit so that we can experience this maximal pleasure? It's because for the survival of the human race, we require sexual relations. Without this fundamental thing, the human race would die out. Therefore, from an evolutionary standpoint, we develop this thing that gives us immense pleasure. The most immense pleasure that you can get from life is orgasm. So we're going to say, okay, this thing is really important for us, therefore we are going to maximize the pleasure circuitry around it to induce the right kind of behavior. It's not just orgasm. This is also why, for example, we develop social relationships. When you hug someone or when you receive a hug, you get this spurt of oxytocin. Oxytocin improves your anxiety, improves your mood, helps you form bonds, relaxes you a little bit, lowers your stress level. Why is that? It's because when human beings hug each other, it forms a bond with them, and this helps them increase their survival chances. So this is the thing. The brain is all designed to help us survive. Even the negative things that we experience like hunger and thirst. Why are they negative? It's because the brain is sending us a signal. Hey, this thing is against our survival. Unless we fix this problem, we will die. We need to be drinking water. Therefore, the brain is going to make this experience of dehydration unpleasant. So, our brain wants to reward particular experiences that improve survival and punish us for particular experiences that decrease survival. Simple enough, right? Now here's the problem. A bunch of people out there have figured out how to abuse this. They activate some of these circuits in our brain without actually providing us with the full benefit of what that circuit is for. That sentence was kind of long, so I'll give you a simple analogy. There's a difference between calories and nutrition. It's like energy and fuel. It's a partial way to stay alive. We can eat calories, just plain calories. We can eat like a candy bar or a Twinkie, but that's very different from broccoli. Our taste buds and our GI system and even our brain has started to send rewarding signals to us when we eat calorically dense food because it sort of correlates with survival. So someone came along and said, hey, I have a great idea. Let's make a candy bar. With a candy bar, what we're going to get is a maximum activation of this particular circuit of the brain, but we're not going to include any nutrition in it. So what happens if you eat candy bars all day? You'll get a bunch of calories and you'll get arguably a bunch of pleasure, but you won't get the full complete experience of nutrition. If you eat a bunch of candy bars, you'll develop obesity, you'll develop insulin resistance, you'll develop vascular complications, you'll literally develop things like numbness in your fingertips and toes, which results in wound healing problems and all of these kinds of problems. So this is the key thing that we also need to understand about these circuits. When we inappropriately activate them, anytime you inappropriately or artificially activate a circuit, it causes problems in the human body. And so what we're going to do is go over a couple of examples of those and really sort of highlight why brain rot is so devastating and so addictive. Another good example of when we artificially activate things is actually medication. You can get medicine for lowering your blood pressure, and that's on balance a good thing, but as I'm sure y'all know, what comes with medicine? Side effects. And this is exactly what we see with all of these brain rot kind of things. When you eat just candy bars, when you take medication, when you watch pornography, it activates your body or brain in an isolated way instead of a complete way. We're getting calories instead of nutrition, and therefore that causes problems. So what are the big problems that are caused by brain rot? The biggest problem with calories instead of nutrition is that it destroys our hunger. Remember, hunger is used to help us survive. So when I fill up on candy bars, I no longer feel hungry. This is the driving force for health and survival and arguably happiness. What's going on the internet is we have a bunch of people who are experimenting with stuff. The most brain-rotting stuff is what rises to the top, because we have this Darwinian experience of, okay, there's like a bazillion TikToks out there, or YouTube shorts or whatever. We're being platform agnostic. We have 1,000 of these things, and which one do you see? You see the one that rots your brain the most because this content is the stuff that activates certain parts of your brain. There's certain content that will be funny but will also activate your empathic circuitry and will also help make you feel pity for someone else, and it engages you in lots of ways. We also know that there's stuff like rage bait, and when we watch rage bait, what we see is increases in heart rate, increases in blood pressure. But when we see increases in heart rate and blood pressure without things like physical exercise, that actually damages our body. So this is the basic problem with the brain rotting stuff. First of all, there's this Darwinian evolutionary kind of selection for the most brain rotting stuff, and the most brain rotting stuff actually activates a number of different circuits, but only partially. Once we start to activate these circuits in a partial way, the biggest problem is that once we activate the circuit, the drive to actually do something healthy disappears. When I eat a candy bar, I no longer want to eat broccoli. Let's run through a couple of simple examples of why this stuff is so unhealthy for us. Everyone knows that dopamine is kind of like this pleasure chemical. We have this part of the brain called the nucleus accumbens, which anytime we do something pleasurable, it releases a spurt of dopamine. We've made a bunch of videos on dopamine, but I'll tell you the most important points here. When we wake up in the morning, our dopamine circuitry is like a fresh lemon, big lemon that's full of juice. Now, there are two kinds of activities. We can do a very pleasurable activity, like playing a video game. And that's like squeezing the lemon really hard. The more pleasurable the activity is, the harder the squeeze. Or we can do a very boring activity, like sorting our mail or going through our mail or doing some kind of paperwork. This is not a very pleasurable activity, so it's like a slight squeeze, like sorting our mail or going through our mail or doing some kind of paperwork. This is not a very pleasurable activity, so it's like a slight squeeze. Now, here's the issue. When I wake up in the morning and my dopamine circuitry is full of dopamine, even a slight squeeze will give us a fair amount of juice. When the lemon is full, I can squeeze a little bit and get a decent amount of juice. The problem is that if I squeeze it really hard when I first wake up in the morning, all of the juice runs out. And then if I try to do a slight squeeze, nothing actually gets the juice out. I need to squeeze very, very hard. I've talked to a lot of people who are addicted to video games, and this is what we tend to find. If you play a video game in the first couple of hours of the morning, the reward that you get from doing work that is important to you actually declines drastically. We essentially empty our dopamine through a video game, and then there's no dopamine left to give us a sense of reward for studying or going through the mail or organizing our bookshelf or whatever. The flip side is that if you wake up first thing in the morning and you start to do work, you're squeezing out some degree of positive reinforcement, behavioral reinforcement, and pleasure. Then, even after you're done doing some amount of work, you can squeeze the lemon. So, we've squeezed out half of the juice by doing not very fun things, and then we can squeeze really hard by playing a video game at the end of the day, and we still have fun. So, this is the problem with brain rot. All of these activities that we do squeeze all of the dopamine out, and then they reduce our ability to experience pleasure from other things. When you watch shorts for about 3 hours, nothing else feels engaging. It's not fun to read a book, it's not fun to hang out with other people. There's no amount of pleasure that we experience from work, where people are like, oh, am I just supposed to work for 8 hours a day and then commute and then work out and do laundry? And this is what my life is for the next 30 years? And I empathize with that. We want life to be more than that. But oftentimes, What I'm stunned by is when I work with people in my office who are talking about how terrible life is. I'll ask them one really simple thing. Hey, can I see your phone for a second? And I'll flip it open. And I'll look at their average screen time usage. I'm shocked because it's usually about 4.5 hours at the minimum, up to about 6 hours a day, which is sort of the national average in the United States. So, it's not just that our life is empty, we are sort of eating so many calories without getting nutrition that it messes up the way that our brain circuitry works. Let's take another example, relationships and socialization. Once again, the internet offers us an opportunity to scratch certain parts of our brain but not really do the whole thing. Anytime you get a partial activation of the brain, it results in problems down the line. So there are simple things like socializing on the internet, right? You talk to your friends and you might even have friendships that exist entirely online. I used to game a lot and had friends I played with for years, even though we never met in real life. I consider them my real friends. I played StarCraft with someone when I was like 16, maybe even less. The first time I met them was at my wedding. So I'm not one of these people who say, oh my God, internet relationships are fake. They are real. They can be very positive in many ways, and they are incomplete. They're a little bit closer to calories than nutrition because there are some things you just can't get from an internet relationship. You can never receive a hug. You can never have physical contact. And these kinds of things are important. When we talk about the circuitry of human relationships, physical presence and touch are hugely beneficial. We've already talked about oxytocin. Anytime I hug someone, I get a spurt of oxytocin. It reduces my stress, improves my mood, my anxiety, and even reduces inflammation throughout my body. So what we see with all these internet relationships is, number one, especially on the brain rot side, we see things like parasocial relationships. This is part of the reason why platforms like Twitch and OnlyFans become so popular. People are figuring out how to scratch more of that social itch, and the more they scratch it, the more addictive it becomes. Take OnlyFans as a simple example. It used to be that pornography just activated your sensory receptors and triggered some dopaminergic circuitry. That was it. You'd see naked people doing sexual things, feel some level of arousal, and maybe there'd be some masturbation or orgasm involved, which gave you a hit of dopamine. That was the extent of it. But the issue with pornography was that you couldn't have a relationship with the person. You were just a consumer. They were filming something for you to watch. Then someone invented OnlyFans. And with OnlyFans, now you can have interaction. You can say good morning and they'll say back to you good morning. You can create some degree of a transactional relationship or reciprocity. You send them money and they make a special video just for you. So, if we look at what this is actually doing, it is starting to activate additional parts of our brain. The problem is, when we start to do this activation, it's not actually like we're moving from Twinkies or candy bars to broccoli. We're actually just eating Twinkies for more parts of our brain. Now, there is this fake level of social interaction because when you're getting a DM from an OnlyFans creator, chances are it's some 45-year-old balding dude who's been hired by the OnlyFans creator to make you feel special. It is highly unlikely that it's the OnlyFans creator themselves. And even if you do this kind of stuff, even if you're directly interacting with them, I don't know that you know. I've never heard of a case of someone spending a ton of money on an OnlyFans creator and then actually forming a real relationship with them. And even if you do this kind of stuff, even if you're directly interacting with them, I don't know that you know. I've never heard of a case of someone spending a ton of money on an OnlyFans creator and then actually forming a real relationship with them. But this is the way that people feel. They think, okay, this person really does get me. This person cares about me a lot. And why do we feel that way? We feel that way because these parasocial platforms engage more circuits of our brain. And once again, the real problem with this stuff is that it decreases our drive to engage in real relationships. I've even heard of people who have horror stories of ruining their real-life relationship because of a relationship with an OnlyFans creator. So, people are figuring out how to artificially activate these various circuits. And the more circuits that they activate, the more we get pulled into it because, remember, all of these circuits evolve to drive us towards survival. So, when our brain gets this stuff, it's like, hey, this is good, this is great, we like this. Candy bars are awesome. We're getting a bunch of calories, and this increases our survival. The problem is that it costs us so much. The first thing that it costs us is it reduces our motivation. It tanks our motivation to actually build the real thing. I've worked with so many people who have so much social anxiety that they'll turn to online relationships because they feel safer over there. But the problem is that you can engender a dependence on that online interaction. Specifically with social anxiety, the more online time you spend, the more some circuits of your brain start to atrophy. So we'll see things like circuits related to body language or tone. Some of these interpersonal communication skills start to weaken when all you're ever doing is DMing people or sitting in voice chats. There's no understanding of eye contact, for example. So what I see is a lot of these people then try to go socialize, and since they don't have practice with eye contact, they don't know how to do eye contact properly. Since they don't know how to do eye contact properly, one of two things happens. Either they get called a creep because their eye contact is really intense and they don't look away, or they get called weird because they don't hold eye contact at all. So these eye contact circuits require some degree of practice, and if they're out of practice, we end up feeling incredibly awkward. Then what happens? I try to go socialize, and since I've been on this diet of candy bars this whole time when I socialize, people call me a creep, or they call me awkward, or I feel awkward, and then it's very hard for me to socialize again. We're losing the capacity to engage in romantic relationships because we're eating this internet diet of this weird, toxic whatever, like pink pill, red pill, whatever kind of stuff. We have all these ideas about relationships, but we're not spending a whole lot of time in relationships. We have all this dopaminergic crap that we're consuming that messes with our behavioral reinforcement and motivational circuitry, so we don't feel like doing anything. We have all of these problems with simple things like socialization and anxiety, and all that kind of stuff, but that's not the end of it. When we spend too much time on brain-rotting content, like random internet trends, video games, or shallow social media interactions, we hyperactivate dopamine circuits without providing real value. The brain evolved to reward survival behaviors like eating calorie-dense food or forming social bonds by releasing dopamine and oxytocin. However, the internet has created ways to artificially activate these circuits without the real-life benefits. For example, junk food gives calories without nutrition, and social media offers shallow interactions without real connection. And partial activation of brain circuits leads to problems like reduced motivation, poor health, and addiction. Excessive screen time and video games can cause real health issues. Research shows that playing video games can worsen allergic skin responses and increase heart rate, blood pressure, and ventilation. Similar to exercise but without the benefits. This stress on the body can lead to damage, including blood clots and strokes, even in young people. Sedentary behavior and screen time are also linked to inflammation, insulin resistance, and autoimmune diseases. These health issues make it harder to break free from the cycle of brain rot. To combat this, focus on replacing calories with nutrition. Identify what you're getting from brain-rotting content, social interaction, joy, and find healthier ways to meet those needs. For example, if you crave social interaction, prioritize real-life connections over online ones. Start small, eat healthier, exercise, and reduce inflammation through anti-inflammatory foods and supplements like omega-3s. Exercise also helps by naturally increasing your desire for healthier habits, like drinking water instead of soda. Poor sleep reduces willpower, making it harder to resist brain-rotting content. Practices like yoga nidra or melatonin can improve sleep quality. By addressing inflammation, exercise, and sleep, you can break the cycle of brain rot and rebuild your motivation for meaningful activities. In summary, brain-rotting content hyperactivates survival circuits without providing real benefits, leading to addiction and health issues. To break free, replace artificial stimulation with real, nutritious experiences, reduce inflammation, and prioritize sleep. This approach helps restore your brain's natural balance and motivation for a healthier, more fulfilling life. Make sure you subscribe for more videos like this, and goodbye.